Hi everyone, this is Rob from the TEFLology Podcast. This is the final of 3 sessions recorded at the 2019 PanSIG conference, in which the plenary addresses were conducted in the form of live interviews. In this interview, Matthew Schaefer speaks to Professor Kensaku Yoshida. Kensaku Yoshida is Professor in the Center for Language Education and Research at Sophia University. Dr. Yoshida has worked extensively with the Japanese Ministry of Education, as well as the Center for University Entrance Examinations. He has published and presented extensively on a wide range of topics, including effective teaching practice, plurilingualism, content and language integrated learning, and many more. Matthew discussed some of these topics with Professor Yoshida, as well as taking questions from the audience. Please enjoy the interview.
So, hello.
Hello.
Hi. So, to begin, to start with, can you just give us a brief summary of your history as a language learner and as a language teacher, and then maybe how you became involved in language education policy?
Okay. Actually, I'm one of the so-called Kikoku Shijo, a returnee, but it goes way back over 60 years ago, because in 1955, I was 7 years old, and I went to the United States with my father, and I lived in New York for a year and a half, and then moved to Montreal, Canada for another 4.5 years, then returned to Japan and did my junior and senior high school education in Kyoto, which is my hometown. And then I went on to study at Sophia University. And it was during my high school days that I helped a lot of my classmates and also underclassmen to prepare for speech contests. And one of my kohai came in second in the All Japan Junior High School. At that time it was called the Takamatsu no Miyahai. It's now called Takamada no Miyahai. And I was the only person who was really coaching this guy, this young student. And when he came in second, I felt maybe this is a good job for me because I enjoyed teaching this guy and I was getting results. And so I decided to become a teacher in the senior high.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your experience as a returnee and as somebody who, I guess, acquired English at a young age, do you think that's played any part into your beliefs about teaching?
Definitely, because as a young child, the only way I was given an opportunity to learn English was in a very natural environment. And that's the way I learned how to communicate, and that's the way I learned how to manipulate the language in a very, natural way. And so my basic assumption is that if that's possible, even for other students as well, that would be probably the best way to do it.
I see. Okay. Can you talk a little bit about how you became involved in language education policy?
Okay. About 20-some years ago, I was asked by the Ministry of Education to take to be one of the lecturers of the so-called Shidosha Kenshu, which is a special kind of teacher training program, which is still, no, not now, it's a different form now, but it used to be held at Tsukuba, Teachers Training Center at Tsukuba, and I started teaching there from, I think, 1994 or 5, somewhere around there. And that was the beginning of my association with MEXT. And after that, they asked me to stay on to take part in different kinds of committees to talk about especially secondary language education in Japan. And I got involved in different kinds of research projects with them as well. And it's continued for the past 20-some years.
Okay, thanks. It's a big question, but can you talk a little bit about the process of developing a new course of study? I guess it's sort of curriculum design on a level most of us can't really imagine.
Okay. It takes quite a while because once a course of study has been adopted and is being implemented in the schools, then people begin to notice different problems that they had not assumed would occur when they were thinking about when they were planning the course of study. And so what happens is that in the process of trying to revise it, different committees are set up by the Ministry of Education to talk about the defects and maybe ways of revising the so-called present course of study, and also in view of the general objective for Japanese students to acquire English as a member of the global, for example, community. And in that, and there are several different kinds of committees that are convened by the Ministry of Education, and through the process of discussing the different innovations, the revisions, and also the objectives, the basic outline of the new curriculum, the new course of study is created, and that is taken up, and then the actual committee for creating the course of study is set up, and then we start working on the details of it. Yeah.
Okay. So talking about the details, can you outline some of the key changes in the new course of study? So my understanding is the new course of study goes into effect from next year?
That's right. For elementary school, that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
But one of the major changes is that English will be introduced from the 3rd grade as a mandatory subject, which is quite a revolutionary thing as far as Japan is concerned, especially with the 5th year introduction of English as a subject and not simply as an experiential kind of program. This is a very big step. The only problem is that it's only twice a week, and that doesn't give us much, or the teachers much time to really treat English as a subject when they only have 2 hours a week. And so the basic design is to try to get the teachers to continue with the experiential learning that the students have gone through in the 3rd and 4th grade, and as an inductive way of introducing knowledge of the language, use the conversations, using the kinds of oral experiences that students have had, then giving them opportunities to notice certain kinds of grammatical issues and so forth, which they might need in order to further expand and use these structures more creatively as they go on. And so it's like not a deductive teaching of language form, but an inductive form of teaching the forms of the language. Another important point is that we introduced the CEFR, the Common European Framework of Reference, as a basis for creating the whole course of study, ranging from elementary school all the way up to senior high school. Basically everything is aligned according to the levels which are set by the CEFR. So there is no disconnection anywhere between the different schools. For example, it's what we do in elementary school will be continued on in junior high school, and that will be continued on in senior high school. And it's written that way. And in the course of study, it's also written that for example, junior high school teachers should always be concerned about what the students have learned in elementary school, and to continue to review what they've done and to continue from where they left off and go on to junior high school. And the same thing with senior high school as well. And one of the major reasons is because junior high school teachers don't refer to the elementary school course of study. They don't know what is going on. They have never looked at the elementary school textbooks. Many senior high school teachers have hardly ever looked at junior high school textbooks. They have not read the junior high school course of study. And so what we want to do is we want to make that transition a lot smoother than it has been in the past. And that's why we set the CEFR criteria as the sole criteria on which all of the course of studies for all the different school levels are created. And the one more important thing is we've tried to, and this is a policy that the ministry has set up for all the subjects, not just English, and that is to try to get the students away from simply acquiring knowledge to being able to use that knowledge for thinking purposes, to use it for decision making and for expressing ideas and communicating. We have tried to create that as the main pillar in the Gakushu Shido-Yoryo.
Okay, thank you very much. You mentioned, using CEFR as targets for the different years. My understanding is CEFR is quite comprehensive in terms of its descriptions of those different years. Is the intention to take all of CEFR or adapt it for?
Basically, CFR, if anybody has seen the new revised edition of the CFR, which came out in last year in March, it's been revised quite a lot. And it's very, very detailed. And I looked at it and I said, this is too detailed for adopting in a course of study like the ones that we have. A more general kind of program where you see the general development going from one step to the other, from A1 all the way up to C2, is better than going to small details at every level, because it just makes things a lot more complicated. And so we've tried, in a sense, to preserve the old version of the CFR, and we have intentionally not tried to include the newer ideas, because it's just, I think, too much for the teachers as well as the students. But at the same time, as we see in all the CFR categories or the models that we see around the world, every country is adapting the CEFR to meet the needs of each country. And so we have a CEFR-J, which is CEFR Japan, which has been conducted and which has been researched for quite a while now, over 10 years. And we do have a more detailed version of the CFR, which hopefully meets the needs of the Japanese students than the original one that came out in Europe. Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned that in the later years of elementary school, English will be treated as a subject rather than experiential. Does that mean, what does that mean in terms of assessment?
As far as assessment is concerned, the official criteria for assessment has not been released yet. There has been an interim report on the development of the assessment criteria, which came out last December. And so at the present time, the assessment is based on 4 criteria, but in the new system, it will be based on 3 criteria. One is knowledge. The other one is the application of that knowledge to thinking and decision-making and communication purposes. And number 3, the last one, is the criteria of for example, how the person is able to develop his own identity as a human being as a result of the application of these rules. And so these are the 3 basic criteria on which the assessments will be made. One thing that I'm a little concerned about is that because the CEFR is based on the so-called can-do statements, I can do this and I can do that and so forth, the can-do is also, in a sense, considered to be a criteria for measuring confidence. In other words, if a student can say, yes, I can, it shows that he's confident in doing something. But that confidence has to be expressed by the student himself. But that's not included in the assessment process that I've seen so far. Now, the concrete assessment for English has not come out yet, so I don't know what the final product is going to be, but I'm hoping that they will also include something which is not simply a teacher-oriented assessment of their students, but also something that the students also can come up and say, I feel I can use English to this extent at this point. A self-assessment on the part of the students as well. That I basically feel that these two have to come together if we really want to make the change that we're trying to implement.
You mentioned that previous courses of study have maybe run into problems in terms of how teachers are interpreting it or what they actually do in the classroom. What do you think can be done to sort of minimize those risks?
The only thing that we can really do is to do a lot more teacher training. That's the only thing we can do. A major problem is that, especially in junior high school, the teachers are too busy. They're just too busy. I've been going around giving workshops and lectures and so forth at different kinds of teacher conferences. But the junior high school teachers don't have the time to do research, and they can't really study that much to prepare for the new curriculum and so forth. One of the things that I hope will not happen is that The junior high school textbooks based on the new course of study is now in the process of being written. It's in what we call the shirobyoshi, which means that the title page is all white, so it doesn't show which company, which publisher publishes the book yet. So it's the process of the shirobyoshi at the present time. Now, I have heard some people say that the content has not really changed that much from the previous one. The major reason is the publishers say, if we change the content, nobody's going to adopt it, and we're going to lose money. Therefore, what they want to do is they want to keep it as close to the former textbook as possible. And as I said, if the junior high school teachers don't have the time to do the research that's necessary to adapt their teaching to the new ideas, then that's something that we can't say you can't do. I mean, we've got to find a way to get the teachers to go through more teacher training sessions, and that's very important, especially junior high. I mean, this is the level. Senior high school, I mean, we all know that the entrance examinations are going to change, so they have to change. Elementary school, it's something new, so it will, and people are interested in what to do. Nobody interested in junior high school. I mean, why? I mean, there's no change. People think there's no change. There is change. If you read the course of study, it's different. But still, people say, oh, that doesn't concern us. And that's one of the major problems that we are facing at the present time. It's always been the case, and I think it's still the case. And we have to do something about changing the ideals for teaching and so forth especially of the junior high teachers. As far as senior high, with the way things are going to whether or not to adopt the new 4 skills test and so forth, especially with public universities, depending on the prefecture that you might be teaching in, there is very little change going on. There are major changes in many of the so-called innovative prefectures and so forth, where there are a lot of teachers who are interested in changing the way to teach, but there are quite a few prefectures still in Japan where very little change is being considered by the teachers themselves. And what happens is that if the local universities in these prefectures say, we're not going to adopt the 4 skills test, all we need is an A2 level, that's all we will expect of our students, that's the only thing that the high school teachers are going to teach. Because these students will be attending the national universities in these prefectures alone. They're not going to come to Tokyo. They're not going to come to the Kansai area. And if that happens, nothing's going to change. So if these local national universities don't raise their hurdle to require a slightly higher level of English proficiency on the part of the high school students, high school education might not change in these prefectures. And that's going to create even a larger gap between the Kansai and Kanto area universities and these local universities. I see it already. I hear stories, and it's depressing sometimes. That's something that I have to bear with, though.
Do the courses of study try to influence or maybe directly state the preferred approach or methodology that teachers should be taking in high schools or junior high schools? Actually,
if you take a look at the history of the course of study, ranging from right after the Second World War, starting from 1947, it's all oral, 4 skills. Everything is 4 skills. In 1947, the ministry came up with what they called the pilot study of the first course of study, and it says right there in the document, translation is not the goal. That's what it says. Very beginning, it says teaching the 4 skills is the goal. Teaching culture is the goal. That's what it says. And in 1970, right after the Tokyo Olympics and the World Exposition here in Osaka, the expression changed from 4 skills to listening comprehension and oral presentation. So the words were now changed from skills, the 4 skills, to communication abilities, to express oneself and to comprehend and understand. And since then, things have really moved towards a more detailed description of what to do in communicative language teaching. And so everything has been geared towards the development of communication skills. So the course of study, I mean, take a look at the history of it, and they're good. Very, very interesting.
Okay. You mentioned earlier about one of the goals in terms of creating, I think you phrased it as members of a global community. Could you explain a little bit what is meant by that?
I think we all are aware of the fact that, I mean, we are in a world at the present time, especially if you take a look at the internet and all this new technology and so forth that's around. I mean, there are no borders anymore. We all know that. You know, you go beyond borders. People are now talking about going beyond the global era. And I think that's also true. I mean, global or regional, they talk about two-dimensional space in a sense. But we've got to go beyond that. I mean, technology is something that helps us to go beyond that stage. And I think that's something that we should be aware of, regardless of where we are. I mean, we don't know who we'll be communicating with. I mean, there are so many different ways of communicating with people, and it becomes more necessary. No one country or no one group of people are going to be able to survive only by themselves, and we all know that. And so, you know, getting the teachers and also the students aware of the fact that they need to consider themselves as a member of that sort of new world, I think, is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. Could you give maybe an example of something that can be done in the classroom to raise students' awareness of that?
Introducing different kinds of technologies is one. Cultural differences is another. The fact that one of the things that I do is, you know, for example, this is still at the global level, but introducing the fact that no matter where you go around the world, you see people from different parts of the world communicating with each other. So here in Japan, the same thing. There are some prefectures where I've heard the junior high school students and also teachers say, our students really don't need to learn English that much because we won't have any foreigners coming around. I was watching television the other day, and these foreign YouTubers were taking videos of locations that very few Japanese ever go to, and these are being spread around the world, and so now these foreign people are going to these places where nobody thought they would be facing these foreign people. And I think that's going to be spread. It's going to be a lot more common in the future. So I don't think we can get away from the fact that people will be exposed to foreign cultures, foreign peoples, foreign languages in the future.
Mm-hmm. Is a part of that also maybe moving away from a American English or British English model?
Definitely, yes. In the Gakushu Shidoyodo, it says that the language, the standard pronunciation that should be used should not be biased towards any specific kind of English or country or people. And what that means is basically it should be English for international purposes, the kind of global English criteria that people talk about. And so if you take a look at the new center test, it's called the Daigak Kyotsu Testo. We have conducted 2 pilot tests so far, and in both tests, the listening comprehension section, up to now, it had been recorded basically by native speakers of English and native speakers of English only, especially American pronunciation was at the basis of it. The last one that we conducted, we had Americans, British, and Japanese speakers doing the recording. So Japanese English is also included as well. And nobody has complained. We thought maybe some people might complain. Nobody complains, because that's probably a very natural thing.
Thank you. Changing topic very slightly, and sort of an issue that's I have a personal interest in. The ALT system has been in place, I think, for about 40 years now in Japan. What do you think have been some of its strengths over that time, and what are some ways that you think it could be improved?
I think it's had a very big impact on the children, especially, because up until that time, most of the children did not have any contact with people outside of Japan. And just being in contact with people from different parts of the world, especially in this case, in our case, English speakers mostly, but not all English speakers, It's not just ALTs, but we have the cultural ambassadors as well. And you include that, and you have people from many different parts of the world going and visiting the local schools. And I think this has had a very big impact and influence on the children in terms of getting to see and being able to talk with people from other cultures and other language families. The only problem is that the ALTs have really not been utilized in a very efficient manner. We've done, several years ago, we did a large-scale study of ALTs. We had 1,800 ALTs answering our questionnaires, and we did analysis of that. And we still have a lot of people who say, I'm treated as if I were a tape recorder. There is no opportunity for me to really communicate with my students. It's just, here's a model, so repeat after such and such a person, whatever, and that's about it. This is not really the way ALT should be used, and we know that. There's got to be something else. The major purpose of an ALT is to show that communication using a different language is different from the way people communicate in Japanese, for example. That's one. Another very important objective is for the Japanese teacher to communicate with the ALT in front of their students, and this gives the students a model, a Japanese person speaking to a foreign person, something that the children had never seen done before. But now they see their own teachers whose English is not perfect, but still they are communicating with an ALT in English. And this communication process, just watching the teachers using English, is something which is very, very motivating for the students. We've found some very interesting results of that as well. There was one, Kenta, I forgot the person's name, but anyway, he did a research in 2015, which he said the model of English should be native English, but the model of the speaker model should be Japanese who speak English well. And this he got from the results of surveys that he did with his own students. So the students do want to learn good English, definitely. But when it comes to the model speaker, the speaker model, they say, we're interested in how well our teacher can use English. They know that native speakers are going to be able to speak English, right? Nobody's going to come up to a native speaker and say, wow, you speak good English. But if they see their own Japanese teacher speaking English, they'll go up to the teacher and say, wow, I didn't know you could speak English that well. And this is the speaker model, and that's very, very important. So that sort of communication between the Japanese and the ALT, I think is very, very important.
Thank you. In Japan, there are many opportunities, I think, for language teachers to engage in various types of research, both in and out of the classroom. So maybe thinking in terms of the areas that you are interested in, what areas of teacher-led research would you like to see explored further?
I guess as a teacher, I think the best methodology that people can use is the classroom research. Action research is probably the best. I mean, as teachers, we all find issues that we think we have to do something about as we're teaching in the classroom. We don't want to leave it as an issue. We want to see if we can solve that issue in one way or another. But we don't have time to do pure research in the sense that we're not really researchers and like people who are doing these things in laboratories. But we are in the actual classroom, and there are many, many different ways of doing action research in the classroom as we are teaching, seeing what kinds of methods, changes in the way we teach would have an effect on our students and so forth. And I think this sort of action research is something that all teachers need to do. And without it, I don't think the teaching practice will improve. And I think that's very important. Another issue, this is also things that research topics that I've been trying to do in the past 20 years or so. I've done it twice, 3 times. And this is trying to look at the ideals that teachers have about teaching. What do they think about teaching? How do they feel about teaching? What is good teaching to them? And are they really doing what they believe is good? Right? One of the things I found in my previous research is that what they believe is good, that teachers should be doing, and what they say that they are actually doing, what they are actually doing in the class, there's a big, big gap. There are many reasons for that. It's not just simply because this person cannot do it because of his personal issues, but because of, for example, organizational issues. The school has limitations where the teacher will not be able to do the things that he thinks is necessary for the students. Using the same textbooks, one teacher coming up with the same examination questions for all the students and everything at the same time. This puts a lot of so-called pressure on the teachers, a lot of limitations as to how much the teacher can really implement the ideas that he has in the classroom. And so those are practical issues that we have to sort of hopefully overcome, but at least trying to get the students to have a sense for what they think should be done, the kind of ideas that they have about what good teaching is all about, what they want their students to be able to do. I think that's very, very important. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, my time's up now, but I'd like to say thank you very much to Kensaku Yoshida.
Very much.
But we're not finished. I have some of your questions here. This is a question from Thomas Amundfrund. Okay, thank you. So his question is, how can or how will MEXT encourage more teacher professional development? Through funding especially.
Not an easy question to answer. But at least as far as public school teachers are concerned, there is funding, especially not just from the Ministry of Education, but from the local boards of education. There are more opportunities for public school teachers to receive teacher training than private school teachers. Private school teachers, they have nothing. They have nothing. Basically, the 私立学協会、私学研究所, all right, 私立学校教育研究所. All right, this is a private schools teachers organization. It's a private organization, and I am also involved a little bit with it, its activities. And it's only possible to conduct, for example, teacher training sessions once in the Osaka area, once in the Tokyo area. We've also done one in Fukuoka, in Kyushu, but only once a year. That's about it. That's the extent. And it's not a lengthy workshop. It's just basically 1 or 2 days, and that's it. But when it comes to public school teachers, they have the Kyoiku Center, the Board of Education. They have their own teacher training centers. Each prefecture has its own teacher training center. Many of the local municipal cities also have teacher training centers. And during the summer, for example, these centers are all packed with different kinds of teacher training programs. There are more opportunities for public school teachers to undergo training, but another point is that not everybody is required to take them. First year teachers, they must. And maybe 10th year students, teachers must, but not in between. It's all optional. And it's sometimes difficult, especially when the Board of Education is also not really that intent on making big changes. As I said, depending on the prefecture, maybe they don't feel that major changes are important for them, huh? And so this can cause some negative. I mean, it doesn't really propel the process of teacher training that much.
Okay, thank you. This is a question from Dana Cusin. And this question is, can teachers contribute feedback to MEXT to revise a certain course of study? And if yes, how can that be done?
I think so, yeah, definitely. If possible, I mean, the first thing that's probably necessary is if you work in a senior, junior high school, elementary school, talk to the English teachers who are in charge, and try to give feedback to them as much as possible. And maybe, if it's possible, also talk to the principal and people higher up. And from there, maybe the ideas might be also transferred to boards of education. There are boards of education where there are very, very good English teachers as curriculum specialists working there. And these are people who really are trying very hard to change the process of teaching in the different schools. And many of these people are willing to hear opinions from different people. But again, I mean, you got to try. I mean, that's the beginning. You got to try and see if people will listen. Also, talking to people like us. I mean, people involved in the creation of the courses of study and so forth through conferences like this and workshops. A lot of the things that I've heard in the past as I was giving workshops and so forth, things that I had to think about. I have also, not in a straightforward way, but in a different form, tried to include in the suggestions that I have been presenting. So the communication among professionals is also very important. And if you can get somebody in the administration involved as well, I think that will be even better. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to read two questions. They're both sort of, I think, addressing similar topics, maybe from different angles. So the first question is, some people might disagree with the idea of promotion of English education in Japan because English may not be necessary to the majority of Japanese people. Could you tell us your response for this? And question from another person, do you see any role for English language education in preserving or revitalizing Japan's dying Densho-geino culture?
What, the final one?
Densho-geino?
Densho-geino. Okay. All right. Okay. Like kabuki and so forth? Is that it?
Yeah. I mean, I think the two questions are sort of asking about the influence of, or the connection between English education and Japanese culture.
At the present time, unlike in the past, I don't think there are too many Japanese who think that English is not necessary. Almost everybody tends to feel that English is necessary. There has been surveys being done even with junior and senior high school students. These are the people who say English is not necessary for me. But when you ask them, do you think English is going to be necessary for Japan as a nation? Over 90% of all of these kids say yes, it's going to be necessary for Japan in the future. But when you ask the same kids, is it going to be necessary for you? One half the students say no. I'm not going to use it in the future. But the country will need it in the future. All right? And I think that's also true of many of the teachers as well. They'll say that it is going to be necessary, but not for my students. Not for my students. And this is the truth. I mean, that's the kind of mentality that many of the English teachers have. So whether or not English is going to be necessary for Japan as a nation, I think almost everybody agrees on that. At least English. Other languages also. If more languages can be taught, the better. It's better if more languages are taught. Definitely. Right? The only problem is that in all of Japan, there are over 700 universities. And almost all the universities have teacher training, license programs for English. But there are only about 70 programs for licensing people to teach languages other than English. Less than 1/10 of all the universities around the world, around Japan. And there's one reason for that, and that is these teacher training. I've seen some teacher training programs going out of business. Why? Because there are no students taking the courses. The students don't come. If the students went to these programs, it would continue. The students stopped coming, and so these programs are shut down. I don't know how to do this though. What can we do to revive all of this? It's something which is a major problem. But that's something that does seem to be true. As far as the Densho-geino or whatever, the dental-geino maybe is concerned, one of the things that we're doing here at Sophia is, I think later this month or maybe next month, we are going to be doing kabuki in English. It's going to be a lecture session, a workshop on kabuki in English. And as you know, kabuki has been performed in different parts of the world in English as well, not just Japanese. And so there is a lot of interest in a lot of traditional arts of Japan around the world. I think this has a bright future. You know, the traditional culture of Japan, I think, has a bright future, along with manga. Manga has a really bright future. I don't know why, but everybody loves manga. A lot of the students who come to study at Sophia, you ask them, why did you come? We want to study manga. That was their first, motivation to want to come to Japan. There are quite a few students like that. But that's not bad. I mean, that's a stepping stone. Huh? That's the first step. Okay?
Thank you. Next question. Many people say high school and junior high school teaching methods won't change until the university entrance exams change, which you referenced. Do you think we will see university exams focused on oral communication in the future?
Oh yeah, that's the way we're going at the present time. This is just, next year is just the first year. The basic philosophy that we have implemented is for all universities to implement 4 skills tests as a part of the entrance examination. The Ministry of Education wants that to be implemented by all universities, both national and private, as well as public universities. Unfortunately, the Center for National Examinations, the Daigaku Nyushi Center, all right, is an organization which probably does not have the manpower or the resources in order to come up with a 4 skills test, especially in the case of, for example, writing and also speaking, especially speaking tests, where you have to have so many interviewers and raters and so forth, and the training has to be there. And another point is that as far as the center test is concerned, since it's a national test, you have to publish the tests right after they've been given. So you can't come up with good tests, keep them, and try to create even better, more objective tests. And that, as far as the national tests are concerned, that's impossible to do. So we found that this is a very big handicap as far as trying to come up with a 4 skills test on the part of the national center. And so our suggestion was that since there are quite a few private tests on the market already, which are, have been proven at least to a certain degree as to their validity as well as their reliability, why not ask these test organizations to help out? And so when we selected the 8 companies and 8 kinds of tests, we asked them to come and help. They didn't raise their hands and say, I want our tests to be in there. We said, please help us. Because we got 500,000 students taking these tests. And it's impossible for just one test organization to accommodate everybody. Just impossible to do. So we need the help of all of these people. Now, in order to make sure that, at least to some extent, these tests are measuring the same thing, we use the CEFR scale. Right, so there are, as I said, can-do statements related to all of the different CEFR scales. A2 says these are the things you should be able to do. And we asked all of these test companies to recheck all of their tests. And there's a manual. There's a manual created by CEFR which says this is the way you set up the tests according to the CEFR criteria. And we had all the organizations do that, all right? And they came up with, with reports saying this is the way we did it. These are the people who were involved, not the actual names, but these are the professionals who were involved in setting up the criteria in calibrating the tests according to the CFR. And after that, we simply had to take them on their word, all right? And because, that's the only thing we can do at the present time. And but the CFR scale is not a one-point scale, but it's a scale which says it's a band scale, somewhere in between here and here. If you belong in between these two scores, let's say, you are at A2 or you are at B1, all right? And if you set up a relatively large scale, then all of the tests seem to fit in, all right? And that's why we're basically saying, let's not use individual scores, but let's use the band scores. Now, we know that it's not perfect. There are a lot of things to be changed, a lot of things have to be revised, but there is a third-party assessment organization. It's called the Zenken, all right? And this is an organization which makes sure that the tests are conducted in a fair and a reliable way. And it's not just the content of the test, but it's also the way these tests are administered. And so this Zenken is also now in the process of checking and making sure that all these tests are conducted fairly. And so if all of this goes through, then I am assuming that the tests should be usable for the purpose of entrance exams. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. One of the sort of common themes I'm noticing in the questions is, I think, maybe just reflecting a lot of the frustration that we in this profession in Japan feel about, I think, the issues you're talking about in terms of new courses of study coming in, but not actually creating the changes that they're intended to. So I'm not sure exactly. One question just says, what do you think it requires for a change? And I think maybe that can cover people asking about some of the, for example, ALTs not being used efficiently, teachers not adopting maybe approach that does get students to focus on communication.
Yeah, I think it involves everything. Huh? How do you change the mentality of the teachers? That's a major, major problem. It's so difficult to change. But as I said, even if you were able to change it, will the physical context in which these teachers are teaching allow them to make the changes that they want to make the changes? That's a physical problem. It's another different issue altogether, but it's very difficult to change. And another, of course, is the problem of the ALTs not being able to utilize the native speaker, the English speaker, in a more efficient manner, not giving the students an opportunity to really be exposed to communication in English. This is also a major problem. And also the problem of the entrance examinations that I just mentioned. I mean, all of these universities supposedly should be using these 4 skills tests. Maybe not next year fully, but the implementation, the ultimate implementation of the 4 skills tests will come in the year 2025 or so. This is the year that the senior high school students who have undergone the new curriculum, the new course of study, will be graduating from high school. And that's the ultimate point. So we still have about 6 years. And I think within that 6-year period, I think we can make a lot more changes and make the examination system a lot better. So we're hoping that things will change in that direction, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Maybe changing topic a little bit, this question is asking about why or how is identity explored in English classes?
Identity of what? The teacher? The student?
Japanese identity.
Japanese identity?
Knowledge application, development of identity.
I told you it's
Okay.
It's the nationalism or the identity in other classes as well, or only in English, or what was the connection?
It's something that is required in all the different subjects, all right? The major problem is, I mean, how do you find out about your own identity if you don't talk to anybody about it? There has to be communication going on outside of your own self. I mean, you got to be able to talk to other people in order to find out who you really are. And that's basically one of the major points. One of the things that it says in the Gakushu Shidoryo for all the different subjects, it talks about mikata kangaekata. All right. So, for example, what does that mean? Perspectives. Okay. From what perspective should this subject be taught? For example, in the case of English, the purpose is to try to get the students to acquire communication ability. But then the mikata kangaekata says, from what perspective? And the perspective mentions, one of the things it mentions is to be able to consider other people, to be able to talk and to discuss and to communicate, interact with individuals. And through the process of communication, change your way of thinking. reconstructing your ideas is something which is very important in teaching English for communication, which means what you do in the process of speaking to other people is you're trying to get other people's opinions, and through the opinions that other people have, hopefully that you will also be able to make some changes in the way you think about yourself, and that this would lead to a higher level of what you might call identity development, the Aufhegen that people talk about. And that's one of the objectives that is listed in the course of study. And so I think that leads to a new identity, in a sense, or becoming aware of your own personal identity.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you very much for all of your questions and comments, and I'll certainly pass them on. Thank you very much.
We hope you enjoyed this interview, and we would like to thank Professor Yoshida once again for his participation. For more about the TEFLology podcast, please visit www.teflology-podcast.com or find us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or iTunes. Thank you for listening.